Hey guys, today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how to make your own hula hoop. So first, some supplies that you're going to need are black irrigation tubing, which you can find locally at pretty much any hardware store. I personally buy it at Home Depot or Tractor Supply. If you go to Home Depot, it's found in the plumbing section. And again, it's called irrigation tubing. Now, when you're looking for this irrigation tubing, there are a couple different ways, a couple different types of tubing that you can choose from. You can choose how thick of diameter tubing you want. So for me personally, I use the 3/4 inch. Some people use 1/2 inch. Some people go bigger, some people go smaller. But again, I use the 3/4 inch. And another thing to think about whenever picking out your tubing is the PSI. For me, I personally use 100 PSI, which is a bit of a lighter hoop. Some people prefer 160, which creates a heavier hoop. So the heavier hoops are a little bit easier to use and maneuver, whereas the lighter hoops are better for doing tricks. Once you have your tubing picked out, you're going to want to buy a fancy-dancy connector just like this. And these connectors can be found right with the tubing wherever you buy the tubing at. So you're going to want to choose, if you choose the 3/4 inch tubing, you want to get a 3/4 inch connector. And you want one that's perfectly straight like this, and this is going to connect the two ends of the tubing to make your circle shape for the hula hoop. Now, in addition to the tubing and the connector that you're going to use to make your hula hoop, you're also going to want a saw. For me, this is just kind of what we had laying around the house. You can use a smaller saw, which would probably be easier to maneuver and cut the tubing. But for me, like I said, this is just kind of what I found laying around the house. You will also want a hard surface to cut your tubing on. I use just a piece of board, just kind of a crummy piece of board. It doesn't matter if it gets torn up or cut into by the saw. So, and you're also going to need a blow dryer, which I have laying over there. Okay, so now that you have all of your supplies, you're going to want to go ahead and grab your tubing. Depending on what size you want your hoop, you're going to measure it and cut it to a certain length. So for example, if I'm trying to make a hoop that's 36 inches, I'm going to take my handy dandy measuring tape and measure the diameter. So this is about 37. That's good enough for me. So that's how you decide how big the diameter of your hoop is. Like I said, it depends on the person. Some people like larger hoops, some people like smaller hoops. So I'm going to go ahead and stick with the 37 inches. I held my spot here where the tubing, where the one end meets and makes 37 inches. And now, I'm just going to go ahead, take my saw and my cutting board, and go ahead and cut the tubing. And some people like to do this outside because while you're cutting it, it does leave all these little black fringy things, so it can make a little bit of a mess. If you don't mind vacuuming, then, it's fine to do inside. Okay, so after you get done sawing it, you should have a piece of tubing that's round like this, your two ends, and then you're going to use the connector to connect them like this, and the blow dryer you're going to use. But so you should have a round piece of tubing pretty much right now. Okay, so now that your tubing is cut, you're going to go ahead and plug your blow dryer in. From here, you're going to hold one end of the hula hoop, and this usually only takes about 30 seconds, maybe 40 seconds, and you want to hold the blow dryer right against the end of the tubing. You can just hold it there so that it gets hot pretty quickly and you don't have to hold it here for a long time. With thicker tubing, like the 160 PSI, it takes a little bit longer to heat than the 100 PSI, but again, it should only take about 40 seconds or so. And then from there, once it gets hot enough to expand and allow the connector to go in, go ahead and push the connector about halfway in. So it should look like this. Okay, after you have the connector halfway in on the one side of the tubing, you're going to go ahead and heat the other side of the tubing just like this. And again, put the blow dryer fairly close to the end of the tubing. Once it gets hot enough to expand, you should be able to go ahead and connect the two ends of tubing together, fully covering the connector. So it should look like this. Right here is where I connected it, you can't even tell. Okay, so from there, pretty much you can decorate it however you want. I personally use gaffer's tape from Identi Tape and goodbyeguys.com. You can also use electrical tape, hockey tape, however you want to decorate it. I use ribbon sometimes, but that's a whole nother tutorial on how to tape a hoop.